Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar in the course of the Climate Academy on People's Pathways to Climate Action. And this webinar will be on the topic of challenges and opportunities for applying nature-based solutions, in formal and informal urban contexts, because we identified this as a key challenge we want to discuss with the esteemed participants of this academy. And for this, we have put together a very distinguished panel with a lot of expertise in the room, and I would introduce them one by one in the course of their interventions. But first of all, let me thank also the hosts of this academy. So from obviously my institute, the United Nations University, I'm leading their team on working on urban futures and sustainability transformation. And if you read my name is Simone Santholz, and I'm here with my colleague Himanshu Shekhar, who is the who is the lead of this Climate Academy. We also have the colleagues from the Munich Re Foundation in the room, Christian and Bettina. So you see a lot of support here, and we are very eager doing this webinar with you. But without further ado, I just want to introduce you very briefly to the course or to the order we're going to discuss today. We want to deal a little bit, we want to start with a bit of a discussion around the potentials of urban nature-based solutions, which very often are seen in the context of the global north, leaving aside the vast potential in countries and cities in the global south. And that's why we're very proud to start with two case studies, one from Latin America, the other from Africa. Then we dive a little deeper and broaden the scale by reflecting a little bit on ecosystem services, on nature-based approaches and the link to urban well-being, but more on an ecosystem scale. And also we will be discussing on the values of ecosystem services and how they can be taken up and where in global agendas and how we can support that. And then let's shed a light on the way forward also very last, and on ways to further share experience and do capacity development. But now let me start with introducing the first speakers. So we start with a very interesting case study from Buenos Aires, Argentina, which will be presented by our dear colleagues from IIED, America Latina, Jojo Hardoy, and then supported by her colleague, Florencia Almansi. And it will be a case study on the application of urban nature-based solutions in Villa Vente in the city of Buenos Aires, as mentioned. And Jojo, maybe you want to switch on your camera, and I believe you also want to share your screen. So I'm very happy to have you here and share your experience from Buenos Aires, and glad to discuss it further with the rest of the panel then later on.
Hi, Simone and everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and I will try to start sharing. Let's see if it works.
Yes.
Okay. Well, today I'm here with my colleague Florencia, Simone mentioned. I will briefly introduce an ongoing in situ informal settlement upgrading process in the city of Buenos Aires, which is particularly interesting because of its participatory approach and scale of intervention. And then I will just briefly show how it's been working over the last from 2016, and how now we are moving towards a new project that will start introducing nature-based solutions, green and blue infrastructure into this upgrading process that did not have this approach before, and which is quite innovative for most of what has been going on in Latin America over the last 30, 40 years in upgrading. So this is here to show you a bit. This is metropolitan Buenos Aires, all the municipalities that surround the city of Buenos Aires, which is particularly here. I don't know if you can see the little arrow, but this is the city of Buenos Aires and all the surrounding municipalities. The The areas that are in darker color are the areas where over 25% of the population live in informal settlements. And in particular, I will talk of a neighborhood, which is in this area. The city of Buenos Aires is divided by communes, and this is in the southern portion of the city of Buenos Aires, where it has the greatest number of informal settlements and people in population living there. This is just a look of the type of urban fabric in informal settlements. These are the bigger informal settlements in the city of Buenos Aires. They range from population of over 30,000 inhabitants in some neighborhoods. And in particular, in the case where we will talk today, which is Barrio 20, it has now, it was at the population census of 2010, it had around 22,000 people living there. Now it's over 30,000. This is the location of Barrio 20 or Villa 20 within the Commune 8 in the city of Buenos Aires in the southern portion. And just to give you an idea, it's now 30,000 inhabitants with 9.2 thousand families and over 4.5 thousand houses. So you have almost 2 families living per house. 75% of the population in that neighborhood is under the poverty line. 26% are owners and 24% tenants or renters. I'm not sure about the word there in English. And the barrio, the neighborhood is characterized by, has a very long historic process of having different interventions and social organizations trying to improve the neighborhood, but with not much success. But it has a very strong community organization wanting to change the characteristics of the neighborhood. And actually in 2016, so I don't know if I switch, yes. In 2016, the community took over a plot next to the neighborhood, and that sort of started and triggered the integral intervention process that the city started together with the community. As I mentioned, perhaps the most characteristic feature of this process is its participatory structure, which was organized at different scales and with different participatory devices. So you have, and that was to start changing initiating the whole redevelopment process. So you have a scale that is more at the neighborhood and community level, where you have different devices to start thinking about the changes they wanted and how they want them to happen. And that was done together with the city, led by the city government, but with all these community organizations participating in a participatory management table and reaching consensus about how the transformation would be. That also involved having service and detailed information of the population and the characteristics of the neighborhood. They also organized in a technical management table to discuss more about the technical details of the transformation that was going to start. And okay, so you have different participatory devices to be able to address all the different needs and bring back the solutions that the community was thinking about. So you have the more general ones at the neighborhood level, then you have other participatory devices at the sector or block level within the neighborhood, and also then more individual family-oriented spaces to discuss different needs and changes. What this brought about is, on the left-hand you'll see a very dense neighborhood with a piece of land that was that area that I mentioned that was took over by the community in 2016 and triggered the upgrading process, and how slowly it changed into it started changing, having new houses built for people that had to be relocated in order to reduce density, open streets or alleys, introduce all the infrastructure and services that the upgrading process was bringing, improve ventilation within the different blocks of the neighborhood. And so this is an ongoing process, which, as you can see here, I have some pictures on how you can open streets or alleys, introduce the patios or small areas within the blocks so they could improve air circulation. And in that process, you can see how from 2016, the neighborhood started changing. In green, it's not a green area, it's the plot that took over by the community. You had a wall before here that separated the neighborhood from that plot of land, which was originally a car cemetery. And slowly it started changing with the participation of all the community, making decisions together with the local government. So you have the new houses that had to be built. It's over 1,500 new houses, units, and how it slowly starts changing into addressing the different blocks of within the neighborhood, bringing in infrastructure and opening, lowering density and bringing all the infrastructure and services to the community. Here you have a few photos of how the process looked like and how it's changing, how they're opening streets, how they are introducing patios within the blocks within the neighborhood to improve air circulation, and how it looks, the neighborhood looks with this very small narrow alleys to get into the different houses, and how some of these had to move to the new units just by the neighborhood. These are the new housing units built by the government. And this is a general overview of the neighborhood, how it's looking today. But despite being a very interesting participatory process with addressing lots of the challenges informal settlements have, this program did not, as other programs in Argentina overall, did not have a look into how it could move into more nature-based solutions or more sustainable development pathways. So this year we started with a project with a consortium of organizations led by UNU EHS, the Institute of Environment and Human Safety of UNU, the German Development Institute, World Resource Institute, and International Institute of Environmental Development. We started a project funded by the International Climate Initiative of the Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, which is named Transformative Urban Coalitions for short. And what we are trying to do with this program is it's actually influence new actor coalitions mindsets to move cities into more sustainable development pathways. So this project is going to be, it takes that, well, it focuses on how cities are leaders in achieving zero carbon emissions, and with the idea that to be sustainable, this rapid decarbonization has to be socially just, inclusive, and driven by the views of diverse groups of stakeholders. So what we will be aiming is to shift the sustainability trajectory of cities towards zero carbon emissions by 2050, altering the structures and systems that are currently reinforcing high carbon and resource intensive urbanization. And for that, we have clear that we have to work with these new urban coalitions to try to drive change within different cities. We will work in 5 cities. One of them, there are 5 cities in Latin America, 2 in Mexico, León and Neuquén, 2 in Brazil, which are Recife and Teresina, and 1 in Argentina, which is Buenos Aires. And we decided, I set up on a structure of urban labs, which are spaces where we will need to discuss and integrate innovative ideas to influence local processes in partnerships with local actors. And in the case of the city of Buenos Aires, we will work directly in Barrio 20, trying to generate new interventions and initiatives with a group of actors that will start driving change within the city, and from there scale up to other, influence other areas. So looking more in detail, this sketch is a sort of where we see we could potentially intervene in the different, in blue are all the different streets and alleys that are in the process of being opened, which are very traditional approach of how the intervention will be. Like you can see in the image here, they are open streets to introduce all the infrastructure of water and sanitation and drainage, but then that's where they stay at, and then they have they open you can see here that it's a very traditional approach. They were also working on this Recoba, which I don't know the name in English, sorry, but it was a street that's sort of the border of the neighborhood, and now it's bordering with a new social housing unit. They are also working on that. They are also working on opening the patios, which are just no green on no other intervention. It's just they reach to the point of only opening these patios to improve air circulation. So what we have in mind is try to discuss with the local government and the community organizations working in the neighborhood and the neighbors, a set of options that could introduce nature-based solutions to these different areas that they are working, these different work fronts that they have. So we are thinking of introducing a network of green corridors and intervening in the alleys that are being opened. We can also think about all the buildings that are being sort of retrofitted to open the alleys. They are just having walls now, so we could start thinking of intervening on those walls with green walls, opening windows, improving thermal insulation of that area. We also are thinking about intervening in the patios, bringing also green into these patios and improving water filtration, air circulation, adding green to improve air quality and thermal comfort, etc. And then we also are thinking of potentially intervening in other of the streets that are being opened, or the community spaces, public spaces that are being opened, in trying to in a way improve a set of indicators that would push the neighborhood into a more sustainable approach. And with that, we also aim to influence how the city government is approaching all these interventions in different informal settlements, and how we could also influence national policies on this line. The challenges that the process has just started. So far, the city government is very eager to be engaged with this type of interventions and take on it. The challenges or potential risks we see are that community actors might not embrace the idea of systemic transformation and decarbonization. It's of course an issue that they still feel probably detached from it. It's not a main priority for them, but so we have to really work on that. We also think that perhaps the urban lab and the actors working within the urban lab do not generate the changes in mindsets that we should expect or that are really transformative. That the new actor coalitions do not gain momentum, they don't influence the development trajectory in the city. It's like they might not be able to really influence other actors. That advances in knowledge do not really translate into action implementation and policy making. And then, of course, the barriers to scaling out, that it could be from different fronts, from political aspects, that city, national government, different provinces have strong political barriers and difficulties in working together, that scaling out will be very much dependent on the different departure points and context of each neighborhood, that perhaps we cannot develop, that not all other neighborhoods have the participatory process going on as in Villa 20, and that will be, so it would be difficult to sort of replicate these kind of processes in other contexts. And also, of course, financial and technical barriers to being able to work and take on this experience into other informal settlements within the city or the country level, or even within more regional level. So I think with this, it's I hope I've been in time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coco, for this very, very interesting presentation. And just to let you know, while you were talking, I already received some messages from colleagues. Oh, this is an exciting case study. So definitely very, very interesting. Thank you so much. If you could...
Yes, I'll
end your present,
yeah,
exactly, that would be awesome. And I just encourage everyone to put questions into the chat, and just with an eye on the time, if you permit, I would move to the second presentation, and then we go for a discussion afterwards. And also just said, put your questions into the chat if you have any. Jojo can certainly answer questions afterwards, so can her colleague Florencia, who's kindly also with us. This was a very local case study, right? So that was from one barrio in Buenos Aires, to, among others, with a focus to improve the local climate. Let's broaden the scale. Let's also think around nature-based solutions in larger ecosystems, meaning urban-rural interfaces. And for this, we have invited our colleague Geoffrey Ndegwa. And Geoffrey is currently serving as Energy for Food Security Advisor at the World Food Program in Johannesburg in South Africa. And Geoffrey, when we asked you if you'd be available for this, you said, oh, this topic is so close to my heart. I'm gladly speaking about it. So thank you so much for being available. And Geoffrey will talk to us about charcoal production, because this is still a key issue in many cities for cooking and so on. But at the same time, there's obviously some environmental considerations around it. And I don't want to take away too much. Thank you so much for being here, Geoffrey, and broadening the scale by bringing us to our attention of these rural-urban interfaces.
Thank you, Simone, for the generous introductions. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm coming you live from Nairobi. I will share my screen. I hope it will.
All right. So we seem to have a bit of a technical issue with Nairobi. Let's wait for a few seconds.
Simon, while we are waiting for Jeffrey to join us again, in the meanwhile, I take a few seconds to bring you up to date with the questions that we are getting. Some definitely very interesting questions. One is coming regarding the funding of the project that was just presented. Also, there are questions regarding whether the project is part of national policy, so whether how it fits with the larger picture. So these are the points coming so far, and now back to you again.
Thank you so much. Maybe while we're giving Geoffrey the chance to rejoin, Jofo, I don't know if you're, Jofo and Flo, I don't know if you're able to spontaneously jump in and answer the questions that Himanshu just put. So one was with respect to the funding. Yeah, so
yes.
Please.
Florencia, will you answer?
Yes, pero no entendí la pregunta.
Himanshu, could you just raise the question again?
The
Yes,
question,
definitely.
yes.
So just give me a second, I read the question out loud. So the question is, it comes from Ursula, that she would like to know if the project is part of the national policy. How long did it take for you to finish the project and how much did it cost? Particularly about the sewage treatment, what was done about it, and if there is any specific strategy regarding NbS. So obviously a very, very loaded question.
Okay. The intervention in Villa 20 is a municipal project. It's not a national program. It's a municipal program from the city of Buenos Aires. And it started 2016. And it takes 200 millones de dólares to
$220 million.
$100 million. It's financed by a development bank that's called CAF. It's a regional development bank in America Latina. And it takes, this is a very big neighborhood in the city of Buenos Aires. There are many of these neighborhoods, informal neighborhoods that are has intervention from the city. And this process takes a lot of time, because you first move families to new houses, then you can open the streets, then you can build infrastructure, and then you have a long process to get the titles in that neighborhood. To finish the process is to, the end of the process is giving each one of the families the titles, and this probably takes a long 10 years in Argentina, because it's not easy to work in informal settlements where the land is public land, and you have to divide it, and you have to divide this, each one of the blocks, and then each one of the plots in between different families. So this takes a lot of time. It's known that at least 10 years far to finish the intervention in Villa 20. So we have time to work trying to change some approaches that are missing now in this development of the Villa. Okay.
And
Please.
sewage, it's just a short, it's a conventional sewage network connected to the service provided by connected to the service provider that provides to the whole city. It's not using any innovative approach or alternative approach in that sense. It's conventional infrastructure.
Thanks, Jojo and Flo. And talking about infrastructure, the line to Nairobi seems to be better right now. So we brought Geoffrey back, though you are now having the same name as I'm having, but who cares? So we can continue on the discussion on the cases later on, but let's hope for a good internet connection and give you the floor, Geoffrey.
Thank you, Simone. Sorry, it's that word problems that we face here. We had a short blackout. So fortunately, I'm able to connect now with my phone, and I hope it is okay moving forward. So as I was saying before, I was interrupted by power outage. I will present about charcoal production in Africa briefly, charcoal degradation, and how it is as a result of demand from the urban centers. And I will present a case in Dar es Salaam. Then I'll present also a case in Kenya, and an example of a project of a study that we did in Kenya, and one of the nature-based solutions that can be applied to sort of address these kind of problems. So moving forward, if you can see on the table on the left, you can see that many of the countries that are leading in deforestation in Africa are also using charcoal as a major cooking fuel, as you can see on the right. When you look at the right, you see the big black circles represent the quantity of charcoal that is being made in each of the countries. And not surprisingly, Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Tanzania, which are some of the most populous countries in Africa, also produce a lot of charcoal. But when you look at deforestation, of course, this is proportional to the amount of forest in each of the countries. But Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, is leading in Africa, followed by Angola, and then Tanzania. Then after that, you have Mozambique. So you can see that there is a sort of a relationship between deforestation in Africa and also the consumption of wood fuels, and especially charcoal, which is normally consumed in many of the urban areas in Africa. Looking at the Continuum model of agricultural land use, you can see that if we put a city or an urban center at the center, then look at the land uses around, you can see just around you will have intensive farming and dairy, then you will have forests. And then as you move outward, you'll have increasing extensive field of crops and ranching, especially for animal products. And if you look at a certain case that was done within Mozambique in a place called Tete by Silva et al., you can see that if you look at the town Tete, initially when the city was set up, charcoal production was actually produced very close to the urban area because the forest resources, because they are, even looking at the Continuum model, you can see they are normally very close to the city. They were accessible, but, and also people are also using even firewood for cooking. But as time went by and people consumed more and more charcoal, the wood resources became scarce, and it was no longer possible to access the wood resources from around the urban center, and people had to move to continue moving out, and this created a second wave towards where the wood resources were remaining. So the waves, of course, they are dependent with accessibility, and one of the main facilities for opening up areas to be harvested for for wood fuel, these I mean firewood and charcoal, are roads. And therefore, the degradation or deforestation naturally follows the road infrastructure. It doesn't have to be like the major roads. It can be even small roads purposely opened up for the purpose of transporting the wood fuel resources. So if this continues, if you look at when an urban center is starting up and wood resources are in abundance, both firewood and charcoal is harvested from very close around to the urban area. But as scarcity bites in, and bearing in mind that charcoal, unlike firewood, which many people can cook with softwood, biomass, or even agricultural residues, charcoal has to be made from hardwood resources. And therefore, it sort of influences the forest surrounding the urban center, that the demand for hardwood is so much that you find that at some point only the softwood would be remaining. And this softwood, of course, continue supplying the city with firewood, but they cannot supply with charcoal. But charcoal has to be gotten from a bit further, and the people have to travel. The good thing with charcoal is that because it is more densified fuel, it can be transported over longer distances than firewood, and also make economic sense. And this is what sort of brings this wave like that you have this the central circle, you have the outer circle, and by the time the city has grown, you find that charcoal can be transported from as far as 200, 300 kilometers away. There's another case study that was done in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam. If you see, in 1991, charcoal was being harvested very close to Dar es Salaam. If you can see the rings around Dar es Salaam, the yellowish green patches, that's where charcoal was being made from to supply the city of Dar es Salaam with charcoal. But by 2005, the radius from which charcoal was being harvested from had grown, and it was no longer possible to harvest charcoal from actually within the inner circle. And some of the charcoal was harvested from many kilometers away from the middle of the city. This has a direct impact. As I said, most of the wood resources are most of the charcoal production targets hardwood tree species, and of course those ones that have a bigger diameter, because the charcoal producers are not targeting small trees. They want a bigger tree that they will just fell and make several sacks of charcoal from one tree. So if you look at the impact on the residual woodlands or forests that remain, you find that there are a lot of tree stumps close to the city of Dar es Salaam. So there are a lot of course, charcoal kilns where charcoal has been made very close to the city of Dar es Salaam. But as you go away, this reduces. But also the tree species richness reduces drastically as you get towards the city of Dar es Salaam. Why? This is because any hardwood tree species is harvested, leaving very few softwood tree species that are standing. So I can say these are some of the big challenges of charcoal production. So whereas you might have direct deforestation when it comes to agriculture, in charcoal production, the target is normally hardwood tree species, and therefore you most likely end up with degradation of the forest or of the woodland. I'm from Kenya, so I present a case from Kenya. As you can see the map of Kenya, you can see the charcoal roots. some of the charcoal is being transported from the neighboring countries, from South Sudan, from Uganda, and it is transported all the way to the main charcoal consuming centers, which we have Kisumu on the west, Nairobi around the center, and Mombasa around the coastal region in the east. So with increase in the size of population from an urban center, increases the demand for charcoal, because as I said, charcoal is the main cooking fuel in many of the urban centers, not only in Africa, but also in Kenya. So, and with the increase in demand, this also increases the price of charcoal. If you see the price of charcoal close to Uganda, in Uganda, actually, it's as low as $6 per sack, which weighs about 40 kilos. If you go to Kisumu, to Busia, which has less population, and therefore the demand is less, it's about $17. You go to Kisumu, which has a bigger population, it's about $22. But when you go to Nairobi, where much of the business of charcoal, Nairobi consumes about 25% of all the charcoal that is produced in the country, is about $34.5 per 40 kilograms sack. So this brings the connection between the degradation that we have seen in the rural areas or in the forest resources around the city or around the urban areas, but now goes beyond, even becomes a transboundary issue, and the population around the urban centers, which actually creates the demand. We did a study in one of the major charcoal producing areas in Kenya, which is about 200 kilometers from Nairobi. It's in Kitui County, close to Savo National Park, which is one of the beautiful national parks we have in Kenya. But due to charcoal demand within the capital city, the woodlands, both actually within the national park, which is the protected area, and outside in the settlement area, is highly degraded. And it being originally an acacia comifera woodland, most of the acacia trees, which are hardwood tree species and preferred for charcoal production, have been cut down, leaving comifera tree species, which are softwood. So our study was able to show that the harvesting for charcoal production actually has a negative impact in terms of basal area. This means that in terms of the quantity of the standing wood biomass in the woodland, in terms of tree composition, because the hardwood trees were targeted for charcoal production, only the softwoods, which are comifera, that were left behind, and therefore the woodlands in Kitui were highly degraded. So we tried to look for solutions that we could recommend. Of course, knowing that energy is important for cooking and for heating in many of the urban areas, we cannot say that the solution is just to ban charcoal production, because with this we'll be denying an important resource to the urban areas. But then we need to look for sustainable solutions. And part of the solutions that have been put out there is promotion of alternative energy resources. Many of the urban centers within Africa are promoting use of LPG, use of electricity, but penetration of electricity is quite low. In many of the countries in Africa, they use between 10 to 30%. So it becomes a big challenge to promote these other technologies, and it's not possible to basically do away with firewood and charcoal. So based on this, we try to work out a regime that can be followed to ensure that there is both regeneration of the degraded woodlands in Mutomo, based on the residual woodlands that were there at the time of our study. And this was very interesting because we based our strategy on on controlling the amount of biomass that can be harvested, on hardwood biomass or hardwood tree biomass that can be harvested from this area for charcoal production, and how much can remain, to see how long it can take for these woodlands in this area to recover. For your information, the mean annual increment, which means the additional biomass that grows within the woodlands every year, is between 4 to 4.8% of the current biomass. So based on that, we worked out, if you harvest all the biomass that is growing currently, of course, that will mean that there will be no further degradation, but the status quo will remain, the forest will remain at the current state. But what about if you ban any harvesting of biomass for charcoal production, so there is zero harvesting? Then we saw that it could take 30 years for these woodlands to recover, because then there will be the natural regeneration taking place, the seeds that are fallen, and then the woodlands would recover to their natural state after 30 years. But then if you say there will be no biomass harvesting, then it means that people will not be cutting down trees for firewood and for charcoal, which doesn't make sense. So we try to argue on how can we be able to balance the amount of biomass that is being harvested to an acceptable level that will ensure that there is finally recovery of the degraded woodlands. And if you look at the graph on the left, you will see that if you allow the harvesting of 20% of biomass, it will take about that 5 years for the woodlands to recover. If you harvest 60% of the incremental biomass, it will take about 50 years. If you harvest 80%, it will take about 65 years for the woodlands to recover. So we recommended that not having a very stringent allowable value for harvesting might be beneficial to the community, because they are able to harvest a little bit of biomass, but the forests are also able to recover. But it would also take a whopping 65 years, but naturally then there will also be the recovery of the woodlands. And the tables on the left shows that if we work with the lower mean annual increment level, you will still be able to harvest by year 65, when the woodlands are completely recovered. You'll be able to harvest about 442,000 over 442,000 sacks of charcoal for the community to use or to sell. Whereas at year zero, of course, you will not be harvesting anything because there is no incremental biomass. But based on the harvesting 20%, then it means you can be able to harvest 140,000 sacks of charcoal at year 5. So basically, from this research, we were able to establish that however degraded the woodland is, if there is some residual biomass and there's the collaboration with the community, it's possible to work out a regime that would be able to ensure that the woodlands are able to recover. And this can work hand in hand with trying to address the demand side of the energy of the biomass within the urban areas, using other approaches, as I said, alternative biomass, but also people have improved biomass cookstoves that also help in the demand side of the biomass use within the urban areas. So with that, I will come back to I will come to an end. I come to an end of my presentation, and I hope it was helpful to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. That was very impressive. It showed very nicely how challenging it is, right, to really have the big picture and to find a solution, because that also has to be kind of sustainable in itself. So sometimes you got to do those evaluations, or as you just put very nicely. Thanks a lot, Geoffrey. For the sake of time, if you permit me, I'd ask everyone to ask eventual questions in the chat. And now I would ask our dear colleague Udo Nehren, who is a professor on ecosystem management at the TH Köln University of Applied Sciences, to continue on this and to reflect further, because what we've heard now from the two presentations, like one very small scale community based, one with a big picture showing already how ecosystems and urban areas interact, to provide us with the ecosystem perspective. As a professor on ecosystems, ecosystem services, that's obviously your task right now, to shed a light on the relevance of ecosystem services for urban well-being. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot, Simone. Can you see the presentation well? That's very good. First of all, thanks, Simone, for the invitation, and also for telling me I have to be strictly in time. I will try so. And to bring in the ecosystem perspective based on case studies for coastal dune systems. So we are now moving to the coast. But before moving to the coast, I would like to give you a short introduction to two perspectives. So I myself, I'm a geographer, and I learned also, of course, about the urban perspective. And very simple, actually. Divide a city into a city center, into a peri-urban area or outskirts, and a rural area. And when we connect ecosystems to that, we very often use the model of what I show here, the rural-urban continuum. So we have a rural area which looks a bit greener, of course, and towards the city center, it becomes grayer, denser, and packed. That is, of course, the case for many cities in the world, also for my home city of Cologne, which is, of course, as everyone knows, close to Bonn and close to the department in Bonn. And here we see, for instance, the inner part of the city of Cologne. It's very gray, and we have small urban spaces here, such as parks, for example, and alleys. And if we go towards the suburban area, we get a nice green belt. For example, we have green areas, large parks along the Rhine River. So from the urbanist perspective, very often we would like to maintain or even improve services of so-called urban green spaces in order to have recreational area for sports. As it was mentioned for Buenos Aires in the very beginning, of course, a good ventilation of the city. We also provide some habitats for animals and vegetation. And of course, we counteract the urban heat island effect. So we actually cool the city as well. And all that goes under, if we see it a bit more from the SDG perspective, under SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Community. If I now turn to the ecologist perspective, it's a little different, because usually we think in landscapes, that means in larger scales, and we subdivide, for example, landscape into a forest patch or forest area, farmland, and river, and then we have somewhere, we have an urban area, an agglomeration, as seen here. And of course, then we could even connect it, give it a hierarchy. Here I use the model of Christaller. Say we have the big metropolis agglomerations, like Cologne, for example. We have then a second hierarchy of smaller urban areas. And that all together leads to one thing here. It leads actually to the change of a more natural landscape into an urban landscape. And of course, that has also some implications. And for us, for landscape ecologists, urbanization contributes to ecosystem loss and to fragmentation of ecosystems. It sounds, first of all, negative. And if we put that also into this figure, which we see here from USDA, then we could say we have urban matrix. Here is one, here is another. We have a farmland matrix, for example, we have grasslands, and we have, for example, forests or woodlands. And our idea is to connect woodlands, connect forests, to connect in general natural ecosystems to maintain services and biodiversity through conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. That goes under SDG 15. So with that background, we can now move to the coast. And why is the coast so important? First of all, that is a statement from UN Habitat already in 2012. Around 40% of the world's population lived at that time within 100 kilometers of the coast, and that will rise until 2030 to 60% of the world's population that will live in cities, and most of those cities are coastal cities. So 80% of major cities with more than 10 million inhabitants are located along or on the coast. And that is, of course, leading to increasing pressure on our natural coastal ecosystems. And one of those, among many others, we have coastal wetlands, we have mangroves. One important are coastal dunes. And I worked in the last years in 3 coastal dune systems. One is located in Chile. It's the peri-urban area of Valparaiso, Viña del Mar. We have a second one in Vietnam, which is the area of Hue and Da Nang. And we have a third one in Indonesia, close to Yogyakarta on Java Island. And then we have introduced a fourth one in the Netherlands, and that is what I call our learning case study, because we can learn a lot from the Netherlands with respect to urban management, and in particular with respect to coastal management. So coastal dune systems in general, they provide several diverse services. For example, they're important breeding grounds for birds, habitats, etc., and have also a high biodiversity. In our case studies, and there are some publications that we divided the ecosystem services as done in the Millennium Ecosystem Service Assessment, in regulating, provisioning, cultural, and then we added a category which is habitat, bio, and geodiversity. And we see there are numerous different ecosystem services provided by coastal dunes. For example, they can protect us from natural hazards like storms, big waves like tsunamis. They can prevent from coastal erosion and soil erosion, but they also, for example, store water, they purify water, they contribute to carbon storage, etc. Besides that, they're living space. We can plant something in dune areas, and we can also use resources. With respect to the biogeodiversity, they are habitats for plant and animal species. They have frequently high geo and biodiversity, etc. And of course, they are very important cultural services. Just think of tourism, recreation. When you go to the beach, very often you go to dune areas to enjoy your life over there. That is what we see here. These are some photos I took. That one here is Chile. It's a coastal dune system. Viña del Mar, Valparaiso. On the right-hand side, we have a coastal system from the Netherlands. And here we see already that is Chile. For example, these barriers, these coastal dunes, which are in Chile 30, 40 meters high, they can protect, for instance, from tsunamis, from storm surges, etc. But they can also be used for recreation activities. And in the Netherlands, most of those areas are highly protected because, of course, they prevent from sea level rise, they trap sediments, they prevent from coastal flooding, etc. Nevertheless, when we go to some countries, some other areas, we see coastal dune systems are lost or degraded, and that has reasons. Because, among others, urbanization processes take place. That's not the only reason why we lose dune areas. We have others like, for example, aquaculture systems putting high pressure, of course, also on coastal dune systems. But here in the case of Chile, of Valparaiso, Viña del Mar, we see actually many of the coastal dune areas are built up and some are completely lost because of several reasons. The land speculation, of course, is one reason, but also the view to the ocean, etc. So we lose them, and with the loss of those systems, we lose ecosystem services. And when we now turn to the nature-based systems, and that figure here, which shows that we have actually 4 main pillars of nature-based systems, which is disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, mitigation, and the environmental management, then we can say coastal systems, they actually contribute to all of them. They can reduce the risk of natural hazards, disasters. They can actually contribute to climate change adaptation because they protect us, at least to a certain extent, from sea level rise. They contribute also to climate change mitigation because they store carbon, for instance. And of course, they are very important for environmental management because they inhabit high diversity, they purify water, etc., etc. So they are very important. But nevertheless, we have this pressure due to different intensification processes and urbanization. And that leads us to my main statement, because that was what Simone said. What is your key message? I said, my key message is that urban and peri-urban ecosystems such as coastal, I could put here also mangroves, wetlands, etc., they need to be given greater consideration in urban planning. And that requires the understanding that ecosystems are more than just urban green spaces. They are more than just parks. They are more than just alleys. They have to be connected. And in the case of Europe, we have a whole network of coastal ecosystems along the coast of Europe. They have to be connected and should not stop at the city boundaries. And that is my key message. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Udo. That was extremely impressive with the very to the point message in the very end. But it also points at the key challenges, right? Think this integrated thinking that I know you're promoting too, like your predecessors in this communication, and that is where I would now also like to ask a question and turn to our colleague Coco Warner from UNFCCC, where she is a manager in the adaptation program. So I hope, yes, I see Coco among the panelists here. So the question would be, how do we now facilitate the uptake? I mean, now we advocated so strongly. We saw two different case studies, one in a very informal urban context, which I would say is among the most challenging settings to work in, because you really have to think about how to implement things and how to get things up and running, right, in this setting. And then at the same time, as Udo and Geoffrey showed us so nicely, we need the big picture. And on the big picture, obviously, Udo had you had SDG 15 in one of your first slides. And then obviously, we also have to turn to the values of nature-based solutions, not only for disaster risk reduction, but also for climate adaptation. And that's where I'd like to turn to Coco to ask, what do you think? Well, how do we promote it? How do we stronger promote values of ecosystems, of nature-based solutions? Do we need to do anything differently? How do we, where would you as UNFCCC need support? Where would you maybe be able to provide support from a very local to a global perspective?
Thanks, Simona, and thank you, everyone. Sorry about the sunshine. I didn't have time to, and then the sun came out. Anyway, so have really enjoyed these thought-provoking inputs that we've heard so far. And because of the time, I think it's exactly as it should be. We need to hear from all of you. I'm just going to maybe provide 2.5 thoughts. At UNFCCC, my work involves climate impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities. And one of the things that is in my portfolio is work with Indigenous people and local communities. And it's in some ways really, there's a long tradition of working with Indigenous peoples and local communities, but in more recent years, they have a committee, and there's like all of this really exciting new work where Indigenous peoples and parties, those are countries, are working side by side to reach decisions. So something that I've been learning in working on this area is, of course, we know this with nature-based solutions, in order to tackle climate change and stay well below even 1.5 degrees, it's going to be very difficult to do that without nature. And the way that humans currently interact with nature tends to be, this is a resource to be used and thrown away. And it's different in different cultures and contexts. And I say that with great respect, because a lot of people, in fact, all of us traditionally needed nature to survive. And we may realize a little bit less if you live in an urban context, but nature is the basis of everything that we have. And it is a resource, and people do need nature. But something that I've been learning with Indigenous people, we start all of our meetings with some kind of Indigenous invocation. And without fail, it will be an acknowledgement of nature as actually not something other than, but the people are part of nature. And you'll hear prayers acknowledging wind and the four directions and water and living things. And I think that there is a lot to be learned about a new or a revived relationship that humans can have with nature, and one in which we regenerate and are stewards of nature rather than destroyers of nature. Now, that doesn't sound very much like multilateral policy, but I think at the foundation, that will be the next frontier that that we need to explore together. And there are a couple of different ways to do it. All of you are right on the vanguard of nature-based solutions. But I think ultimately it's a foundation of understanding that nature in all of its different formats is not only a resource to be optimized for human use, but it's so much more. And a lot of I'm an economist, so I think a lot about distribution and optimization. And I think we need a new equation and a new value of nature. For those of you who are familiar with the Dasgupta report, I think it's something like the economics of biodiversity. It would be very helpful if there were a way to value nature differently and more fully. Not only as a resource that can be owned and sold and consumed and disposed of, but really understanding and valuing nature for many of its inalienable services. So I know that's a little bit philosophical, but in order to be stewards of nature, humans need to reorient towards nature. And there's a lot to be learned from you as pioneers, from Indigenous peoples who, by the way, the NbS report from, I think, 2019, confirmed that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is stewarded by Indigenous people. 80% of remaining biodiversity is stewarded by less than 6% of the Earth's population. There's a lot to be learned and a lot that we can do when humans come together around a common purpose. We put people on the moon, we write symphonies, we do great things together. And I think that we can harness that potential in our many challenges of the 21st century, including climate change. Philosophical, but that's the main idea. And we have to figure out how to do it at a grand scale. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Coco, particularly for the philosophical ending here, and then also for pointing us at the need to think bigger and to still learn. You also said learning quite sometimes in your intervention, and you also mentioned culture and context and how far that matters. And then that's a very nice like hint at what we're going to move to right now. And then after that, I'm inviting you definitely back to hopefully a short discussion, at least because we're a little over time, but we need to facilitate the uptake of nature-based solutions, right? We need to learn more on how to actually do it and what makes sense, and then how to also point people at the need and the benefits and co-benefits of those approaches and across cultures. And that's where I want to invite my dear colleague Marwa Khalifa who's a professor of urban planning at the Ain Shams University in Cairo, Egypt. And she's not only very knowledgeable on the planning and on the Egyptian context, but she has been exploring this nature-based solutions topic around the globe in multiple networks and teaching and education capacity. So Marwa, we invited you to share with us some very optimistic, some promising ways to share those experiences across culture and context. So we're very eager to learn from you right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona, for the very warm introduction. And I'm very much delighted that I'm with you now and listening to this very interesting presentations from the different scales, from the very local inner city case of informal settlements to this one of citywide and rural urban linkages, and finally by Udo how to connect the or integrate the ecosystem with the urban perspective as well. Very much, yes, nice, interesting presentation. And maybe I can reflect a bit about, yes, our experience in Egypt, or how we are also trying to integrate or raising awareness about the concept of eco-DRR, natural-based solutions. Maybe I will talk about the education perspective, yeah, because I think this can be the start point where we can, yes, make some sort of awareness and qualify more people to use the concept. We have, yeah, very at the beginning, I think maybe, of course, you remember, Simona, that we have attended this training of instructors 2012, yeah, about the concept of eco-DRR. And since then, we have tried to integrate the concept in some of the running courses in our curricula, because when we have done some sort of screening in our undergraduate and postgraduate curricula, we find that the topic is, very lacking. Maybe we have some courses regarding the environmental planning, environmental impact assessment, but things related to climate change adaptation, eco-DRR, natural-based solution, and this time it was it was almost not existing. So we have tried to integrate it slightly in the running courses, and when we have updated our curricula by 2015, we have established a complete course about disaster and environmental risk assessment. So we believe that education can really play a role in changing the mindset and doing, yes, such path of transformation for individuals and society. And so this was the start point. Also, we have tried to disseminate the different MOOCs established by our colleagues from UNEP and BEDR. The first MOOC was in 2014 about the disaster environment and risk reduction. And the second, I think, nearly one is 2020 about natural-based solutions. So this was very much also interesting and very appealing for the students, and it targets wider groups, not only students, but practitioners, professionals. So this is quite interesting. We also established a master program. It's titled IMAREC, Interdisciplinary Master on Resource Efficient Cities, where we look at the different resources and how the flows in the city, look at the different flows of water, energy, food, and addressing the concept of urban metabolism. So we are trying also to look at the city as like a socio-ecological system, not with very separate kind of systems, but rather as a more integrated one. So yeah, hopefully these are some efforts to include the environmental measures and the concept of eco-DRR and natural-based solutions in our curricula in universities. And I had just a minor comment with regard to the first presentation, because it's very much similar to the context in Cairo. such kind of, yes, informal settlements upgrading. And of course, you know, Cairo, we are like one of the largest metropolitan areas, I think, all over the world. The GCR, Greater Cairo region, is about 25 million inhabitants, where almost 50% of the region is almost unplanned or informal. And the project presented by Juju is very much, yes, similar to what typology we have in our informal settlements, this kind of you know, urban settings itself, the typology of the informal settlements itself, with these very high densities, narrow streets, no open spaces. And what I like in the presentation of this case is the importance, or how the community has been engaged in the different phases, I would say, and the nearby site for reallocation, the people who are affected with the openings, the streets that their houses has been demolished, or they have to be reallocated somehow. Because I would say this is one of the, you know, most challenges affect such kind of project. If you force the population, the people to move to far away locations, this never work, you know, because their, you know, habitats, their life, their source of income are related to such location. So this was quite I mean, good approach to have. And the challenge is when Juju mentions that adding the environmental solutions later on, or applying some of environmental measures in the reallocated area. I'm quite aware that this is not on the priority list at all of neither the municipality nor the people. But I would say if we introduce it in a way that it will add some revenue to the people there. So instead of just saying we will have green wall on one of the facade, no, we will have some sort of urban farming or urban agriculture on the rooftop that will bring, you know, some revenue to the people there. I think they maybe will accept the idea and can work on. So I don't want to take more from the time, but I just wanted to give a brief about some of the effort we are trying to do within our universities to advocate and promote the concept. And yeah, so that's from my side. Thanks you, Simona.
Thank you so much, Marwa. That was very insightful. So I know the whole portfolio you're doing, and that is very impressive. And maybe we can already now invite everyone else from the panel back to the discussion for the last minutes. And also everyone feel free to post additional questions. Now, please all switch on your camera so that at least for 10 minutes we can have a bit of a proper discussion here. Coco, Flo, Marwa, Geoffrey. Thanks a lot for all your contributions. And then Marwa already reflected on the case study that Coco presented and the challenges of informal urban contexts, and how challenging it is to think about nature-based solutions in informality, right? Because of density, because of other challenges. And there were a lot of questions around this already. So I don't know, maybe going back to Jojo and Flo potentially, because there were a lot of questions. I know you answered them already bilaterally, like in the chat. How did you make it happen? How did you convince people that those green areas, that having the green patios, and so that this is a thing that might be beneficial? Was it necessary to convince the communities? Was it necessary to convince the city? How did you make it happen? And where would you maybe like to have additional support, not in terms of funding, but maybe in terms of capacity development, learning, or just other resources?
I'll start, Florencia, and you can join if I'm missing something, but we haven't really started yet introducing this within the community. As I mentioned, we are only just starting this project, which is Simone is coordinating, and so you will have to stay looped for the next years to see how much we are able to do an impact and change mindsets. So far, we have received a very good, the city government and the Institute of Housing that leads the reurbanization process in Villa 20. It's very interested in the project and very open to get into this type of ideas, innovations, and implement. Some things that we've talked with other city offices, for example, especially the environmental agency of the city, it's one of the things they need more. It's to be able to have ways of proving that this actually improves different aspects of life. And so if they have measures and things that they can then show and convince others, especially for an environmental agency that's usually sort of kept on the side from the planning processes, it would be very interesting for them. In terms of the community, we haven't actually really started working on this with them. From small talks with community members, they are showing interest in trying these things, because they already reached a lot of what Marwa was saying. You already have a very strong transformation process going on, so they can think of other issues now. The basic things have been sort of, or are being solved in some ways. Florencia, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, perhaps another thing is that when you have a very important participatory platform, it's easier to get some new issues or approaches, no? Because the people have been trained in these last 4 years, working together with people working in health issues, in different aspects, no? In law, in health, in public space. There are many people working together with the residents of the barrio, trying new ideas. And now you have a very important platform, participatory platform, and you have the basic needs covered in one side, so you can work in the other issues now, no? Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much. And maybe that's something you said, and Coco said something which I think needs to be complemented by Udo right now, because you said we need to convince people about nature-based solutions and that they improve lives of people, right? And that this really is a benefit. So Udo, I know you've not only been working in urban areas, we needed to convince you to do so a couple of years ago. It was rather other areas, but maybe you can share some experiences on the evaluation part. How do we convince decision makers, and what's the measures, and then also maybe can we learn from other ecosystems in urban areas where I feel it is particularly complicated for different reasons?
Yes, Simone, as you said, for different reasons. And yesterday I just watched the German television and the case of the Ahr Valley. And the people don't trust nature-based solutions even here in Germany. They think even about issues like maladaptation, etc., or that ecosystems can even harm them more than prevent them in case of the German flood. They said our houses were destroyed by tree trunks, etc. Even though I saw on the television there were many big things like cars, vans, etc., that destroyed bridges, etc. But they took the cases where the natural environment actually did the harm. And I think there is still a lack of understanding on both sides, from the normal citizen also to the policymakers, how to really effectively and efficiently use the ecosystems and where maybe better use grey infrastructure. And that is particularly for our coastal areas. the people still trust more, for example, in the Delta project in the Netherlands, which is a huge seawall project which prevents from storms, rather than using coastal dune systems. So they think, oh no, the nature, it is not that effective probably. And we see that from all over the world when we go to mangroves, etc. Also, people think better a dike or a seawall rather than using mangroves. So there are different issues actually in urban areas, but also in the countryside that we have to convince citizens, but also policymakers. And what is also overlooked a lot is the different ecosystem services. Apart from just preventing, Mara, what you said, right? The disaster risk. Of course, great infrastructure can prevent from many types of disasters, but it's gray. It does not provide ecosystem services or just a little, while a coastal dune system provides lots of ecosystem services, for example, water purification for the drinking water in the Netherlands. So I could open now Pandora's box with many different issues, but just those comments.
No Pandora's box, because we need to wrap up. We have only a few minutes left, so definitely no time for that. So instead of doing that, let's go for a very quick, Coco always says thought-provoking, very short round in the very end. So, you know, this is a webinar in a series of events for young researchers, practitioners from around the globe who are working on those urban nature-based solutions. And they all came with very impressive case studies, but all very different, super interesting. But so they all are going to work together for the next couple of months. So if you think about aspects of urban nature-based solutions and in the context of your work, what do you feel are the biggest demands? What do you feel are the biggest challenges? What would you suggest are burning topics they should work on to facilitate future uptake of nature-based solutions in cities and to make our cities more inhabitable and climate friendly and more sustainable in the future? I'm just starting randomly from the left to my right on my screen. So sorry, Udo, you are on the spot again.
So I have to start again?
Yes.
Okay, no worries about that. So respect to urban NbS, I think what comes to my mind is that we really need evidence that nature-based solutions work for several, in my case, because I'm working on natural hazards and disasters, that they work also for different types of disasters, that they are efficient and that we prevent from maladaptation also in urban areas. So Simone, you know that we work together in Brazil on landslide risk reduction. So imagine you reforest slope and the slope is not stable with a nature-based solution and it actually harms people, people die. Wow. What would people in the future think of reforesting slopes, for instance? And that is exactly the same for any other type of natural hazard.
Very true. So over to Jojo and then Flo, and we conclude with Marwa, because I think Geoffrey is no longer here. So Jojo?
Well, I think it's related with what Udo just said, that further evidence is needed so that when you start getting engaged in this upgrading or transformation process of informal settlements, you already start thinking with a nature-based solutions framework in mind, not to start to add it on afterwards. And then it's not something that will change investments or whatever. It could be really done from the start and thinking much more ahead in ways more sustainable. So it would be more preventive than just then trying to include things as add-ons.
And the same, but also I think that another case studies that things have been implemented in similar or some similar context are very useful to change mind in the cities. No, we need data, but we also need to show that the things can be done different, and in some places in Latin America or in Africa or in Europe, the things are doing different, and you can see
how the process was done.
Thanks, Marwa. Famous last words.
Yeah, final words. I would say, because I am coming from a perspective that what is dominant in our context is this kind of engineered hard, solutions for for issues related to climate change adaptation or eco-DRR. So to integrate eco-based solutions or such soft measures and natural-based solution is quite hard. But I would say that we can encourage this hybrid, way of integrating both at the beginning, to encourage more, the local actions and initiatives by the youth, the NGOs, for having a small scale, pilots projects that can be later on scaling up for higher levels, and hopefully opens a dialogue for science policy and raise the awareness of the multiple benefits of natural solutions and how it's improve, the biodiversity, the livelihood of the community.
Those were so beautiful last words, nothing to add here. Thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, Geoffrey dropped out for probably another power shortcut. Difficulties in Nairobi. Thank you so much, Jojo, Flo, Marwa, and Udo, and everyone. And also thanks to Natalie, who just so briefly, she was my mastermind in the background, moderating all the chat, and also thanks to all the Academy organizers. Thank you, everyone. I got the reminder from the Master of Ceremonies, Himanshu, to inform you that there's 2 events tomorrow afternoon, German time. The first one starting 1 p.m. European time, presenting more case studies from around the globe. And I guess we did a good job, or the presenters today, not me, you all did a great job in presenting case studies from different contexts, but still showing the similarities and the challenges we need to overcome here. So thank you so much and have a very nice rest of your day.
Thank you, Simone. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.